One worker entered the bin to clear the screenings and became engulfed when the screenings shifted. Another worker tried to rescue his coworker but was engulfed to his waist before being rescued by first responders from the local fire department.
Let's go ahead and get to Boss Watch. We do these two segments every week, or we try to, where we take a look at what bosses were up to, what workers were up to in the South with Last Week in Southern Labor. And we also take a look at what bosses were up to in the South with Boss Watch. So let's start in Florida, where a U.S. Department of Labor investigation found that 2 contractors could have prevented a crane collapse at a Fort Lauderdale residential construction site in April 2024, which caused a 27-year-old rigger to suffer fatal injuries after falling approximately 30 stories. Investigators with the department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration learned that 2 workers employed by Phoenix Rigging and Erecting LLC were installing a section on a tower crane to increase its height when a support cable failed and the platform on which they stood became displaced. One worker, who was wearing the required fall protection and tied off, was rescued, but another worker whose lanyard was not connected to an anchor point was fatally injured. OSHA cited Phoenix Rigging and Erecting in Mableton, Georgia, for 3 serious violations for failing to do the following: identifying and replacing or otherwise repair corroded and cracked pins or bolts designed to secure the crane's climbing frame and apply end connections properly. They failed to ensure the use of fall protection equipment, and they failed to conduct pre-inspections of crane components before allowing employees to start work, and ensure cranes were inspected properly by a qualified person for damage or excessive wear. The agency also cited a Canonsburg, Pennsylvania crane rental company, Maxim Crane Works LP, for 2 serious violations for failing to do the following: observing deficiencies to significantly corroded and cracked pins and bolts, and improperly applying end connections. They failed to allow employees to start work without conducting pre-inspections of crane components, including but not limited to U-bolt clamps, bolts, pins, thimbles, and wire ropes, to ensure those were inspected adequately by a qualified person for damage or excessive wear. OSHA cited the construction contractors for 5 serious violations total and proposed $61,000 in penalties, the maximum amount that OSHA can legally recommend. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that over 1,000 construction workers were fatally injured on the job in 2022, with 423 of those fatalities related to falls from elevation, falls, or trips. In Missouri, a Missouri grain cooperative could have prevented an employee's fatal engulfment in a storage bin in May 2024 had it followed federal workplace safety requirements, the U.S. Department of Labor determined. Responding to the employer's report of a worker fatality, investigators with the department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration learned that 3 employees of MFA Incorporated, operating as MFA Railcar, were removing corn screenings comprised of clumps of corn dust from a bin at the company's Hamilton facility. One worker entered the bin to clear the screenings and became engulfed when the screenings shifted. Another worker tried to rescue his coworker but was engulfed to his waist before being rescued by first responders from the local fire department. OSHA found the Columbia Grain Cooperative had not completed a required bin entry permit before allowing the worker inside. Additionally, the conveyor was running with the bin's bottom gate open, increasing the risk of product shifting and the risk of engulfment. The employer also lacked adequate rescue equipment, failed to ensure the worker wore a harness and a lifeline, and did not follow other required safety procedures before entering the bin. Following the inspection, OSHA cited MFA for 1 willful violation and 5 serious violations and proposed penalties of $240,000. Specifically, the agency identified the following safety failures: lacking adequate rescue equipment on site, failing to protect employees from falls on working surfaces, not verifying that mechanical, electrical, and hydraulic and pneumatic equipment inside grain storage structures were de-energized, locked out, and tagged out to prevent operation when workers entered, allowing workers to enter a bin without completing the permit process, and not testing the bin's atmosphere before workers entered.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
Over in Louisiana, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, settled cases of alleged Clean Air Act violations at 3 facilities in southern Louisiana as part of the agency's focus on achieving results in communities with environmental justice concerns. The cases involve alleged unauthorized emissions of chemicals, violations of startup, shutdown, malfunction requirements, and other requirements of the National Emission Standards for Hazardous Air Pollutants. The violations were found at DuPont Pontchartrain Works petrochemical facility in LaPlace, Vopak Incorporated in Hahnville, and Westlake Chemical, formerly Axial, in Lake Charles. Inspections at these facilities were part of the Pollution Accountability Team, a special enforcement project developed as a follow-up to Administrator Michael Regan's Journeys to Justice Tour in Louisiana. Inspection reports for these cases are available online. The DuPont settlement assesses a civil penalty of $480,000 and addresses violations including unauthorized emissions above the allowed limit at a benzene storage tank and failure to comply with regulatory requirements for an open-ended line. Conditions of the settlement include installing advanced equipment on the benzene storage tank, enhanced monitoring using EPA Method 21 and optical gas imaging, a third-party audit of all conservation or emergency vents storing benzene or Group 1 liquids, record keeping and reporting requirements, and updating permits as needed. The Vopak settlement assesses a civil penalty of $168,000 and addresses violations at the company's for-hire bulk storage terminal, which stores raw materials, product, and benzene containing wastewater from an adjacent facility. Violations include unauthorized emissions from external floating roof tanks identified using EPA's geospatial measurement of air pollution technology. The settlement requires the facility to conduct quarterly inspections of each floating roof tank, including rim seals, a permit and operations review conducted by an independent third-party auditor, and complete site-specific corrective actions. The Westlake settlement includes a civil penalty of $825,000 and addresses violations of startup, shutdown, and malfunction requirements and unauthorized emissions, among others. The settlement requires the company to submit a performance testing plan and conduct an annual additional performance test of its 2 thermal oxidizers, submit that to the EPA, and a list of all pressure relief devices used for hazardous air pollutants. We have several dishonorable mentions this week. The U.S. EPA announced agreements with 4 companies: AES Puerto Rico, Keystone Conemaugh Projects in Pennsylvania, Alabama Power Company in Alabama, and the Public Service Company of Colorado in Colorado to settle violations of the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act's regulations related to coal ash surface impoundments and landfills. The settlements require companies to take certain actions, including addressing groundwater monitoring issues, conducting effective and protective groundwater cleanup, addressing emergency planning, and paying a fine. AES's fine is $71,000, and Alabama Power's is $278,000. Synergy Entertainment Group Incorporated, a Texas corporation operating multiple cinema and entertainment centers across the country, will pay $137,000 and provide other relief to settle a retaliation lawsuit brought by the EEOC, which alleged that the company just straight up told a worker in North Carolina that she was not eligible for rehire because she filed a previous discrimination charge with the EEOC after being fired from a bartending position in 2022. VibraLife of Katy, LLC, a rehabilitation and assisted living facility in Katy, Texas, will pay $80,000 and furnish other relief to settle an EEOC disability discrimination and retaliation lawsuit that alleged an employee with a sleep disorder was hired for a position to work 36 hours a week, but then was told she would have to work 48 hours a week. When she requested an accommodation to only work the hours listed in the job posting that she applied for, she was fired. Investigators with the U.S. Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division found that a South Carolina cleaning services provider misclassified 59 workers as independent contractors, resulting in the company paying employees straight time rates for all hours worked over 40 instead of the time and a half premium for overtime hours. The employer also failed to keep records of the amount of time worked by employees as required by law. The division recovered $53,000 for 59 workers. The U.S. Department of Labor announced that its Mine Safety and Health Administration completed impact inspections in September 2024 at 8 mines in Indiana, Kentucky, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wisconsin, and issued 112 violations. The U.S. Department of Labor filed a complaint after investigators with its Employee Benefits Security Administration found that since at least 2016, the company's Suffolk Administrative Services and Providence Insurance Company and their current and former executives Alexander Renfro, William Bryan, and Arjun Ziegler have marketed, sold, and serviced employer-sponsored health benefit plans while collecting and diverting significant fees for themselves in violation of the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. The U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs has entered into an agreement with McKesson Medical Surgical Incorporated, one of the nation's largest distributors of medical supplies, to resolve alleged systemic hiring discrimination against nearly 900 Black, Hispanic, and white applicants at its Grapevine, Texas distribution facility. And Surest Property Group and its divisions, Surest Property Services and Surest Development, a real estate operating company and asset management firm in Atlanta, Georgia, agreed to pay $75,000 and provide other relief to settle a race discrimination lawsuit filed by the EEOC that alleged the company fired its only Black employee because of his race. We did have some good news, though. Fewer workers are dying from hazards, where the U.S. Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration has focused its enforcement resources. Preliminary agency data show a decrease in fatalities that the agency is mandated to investigate, including significant reductions in fatal injuries from trench collapses and falls, two of the leading causes of death among construction industry workers. A quote from Assistant Secretary for Occupational Safety and Health, Douglas Parker: "These numbers are promising evidence that stronger enforcement and collaboration with labor and management, driven by the Biden-Harris administration's worker-centered approach, is saving lives. Most striking is the improvement in areas we have focused on with employers and unions. Our state program partners have also seen improvements. In fiscal year 2024, federal OSHA investigated 826 worker deaths, an 11% reduction from 928 in the previous year. Excluding COVID-related deaths, this is the lowest number of worker fatalities OSHA has been mandated to investigate since 2017. So, some good news there to wrap up Boss Watch.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.